All he's saying is that we have not yet industrialized. We cannot be stymied in our economic development, and therefore the nations that have industrialized and are the biggest emitters in the world must help the Philippines and many others like us. So the president is simply espousing climate justice. He never said we will not ratify the agreement unless I've not seen or read that report. So I think, with all due respect, reporters and journalists must understand where the president is coming from. He is the president of 100 million people of a very vulnerable nation that needs assistance from industrialized nations. And so what he's saying is that, help us, we need the help. You cannot ask us to sign an agreement and ask us to mitigate, period. It must be mitigation, adaptation, technology transfer, and assistance, and capacity building. I understand where he's coming from. At the proper time, I'll have a chance to explain it to him.
That's a very fair point, Senator, but we do have him on tape saying that he will not honor the agreement. And I think the bone of contention is the fact that we had committed to reduce emissions by 70% by 20...
Let me again correct you. I'm sorry, I just have to say this.
It's not legally binding, yes.
No, it's not that it's not legally binding.
It's still what we put forth.
Nothing in the agreement states that we have to reduce emissions by 70%. In fact, in our INDC, we had submitted a 70% reduction in emission conditional on the technical and financial assistance of the industrialized nations. In short, the Green Climate Fund of $100 billion can be accessed by the Philippines for mitigation, for adaptation, for renewable energy, for capacity building, for mangrove rehabilitation, planting, many of that. So, assuming it is simply a mitigation agreement, then the president probably means that who are we to mitigate, to reduce when we are 0.3 emitter in the world? And that makes a lot of sense. But because it is both mitigation and adaptation. And at the proper time, I'm sure all of these will be explained to him.
Through God's grace and mercy on our nation, President Duterte's diplomatic initiatives have been highly effective and is immediately bearing fruit. And we expect that this will continue in terms of delivery of projects, funds that will be a product of goodwill that he has worked for, because it seems that the one-on-one diplomacy is one of the things that the president has mastered or is a natural in. While unsettling at times, it is part of the resetting and the correction of our foreign policy. Talagang pagka inaprut mo ang isang policy, and especially foreign policy, there will be giant ups and downs, no? To just give you an insight into some learnings over the trips, and as chairman of the Committee on Foreign Relations, you know, all politics is local. This is repeated by all politicians. But what isn't often repeated in foreign policy is that all foreign policy is based on local politics. And what is this? First, the national values. Ano yung kultura mo, ano yung tradition mo, ano yung values mo as a people. Second, national needs. Ano ang pangangailangan ng iyong mga kababayan at pangangailangan nyo bilang isang bansa. Together, the national values and the national needs come together as the national interest. And when you talk about the national interest, the president, together with the leaders of the country, have a vision. From this vision, you have goals, and you cannot achieve these goals without plans. And from these plans, you have strategy and tactics. Some people confuse the president's tactics or strategy with the president's foreign policy. And we can go on to that later sa question and answer, no? But a good example is how he deals with people who criticize the drug war, no? That's not about foreign policy. That is really about the strategy or the tactics in dealing with the foreign policy. The foreign policy has not changed. What has changed is the strategy in implementing it. In terms, for example, of the drug war. What is our national needs? Ano ang pangangailangan ng ating bansa? Unang-una, peace. Peace sa kaliwa, sa mga komunista. Peace sa ating mga kapatid sa South and all over the Philippines, mga kapatid nating na ang kanilang religion ay Islam. Para ang Kristiyano at mga Muslim at iba't ibang mga religion, nagpa-practice ng iba't ibang religion sa ating bansa, will live in a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious society, and we can work and live together. Peace leads to development, but peace can only be had if you have security. So isang part din ng peace is freedom from the dangers of crime and from the dangers of illegal drugs. With this, development can come, and with development, the dignity of life. Jobs, healthcare, education, housing, income and prices o presyo, trabaho, kita that will allow us to provide for our families and allow us to create a society of equal opportunities. Hindi yung mayayaman lang o yung malalaki lang, makapangyarihan lang ang nagahari. That is why President Duterte is fighting so hard, and that is why he gets easily angry when there are moves to stop him or stop us in our drug war, or there are moves to stop us from achieving our goals, and lastly, pag nakikita siyang naaapi. So having said that, I hope I provided a simple paradigm or way of seeing how the foreign policy is being implemented. Question, kailangan ba ng paglilinaw? Yes. But we are at the phase 1. Wala pa siyang 200 days. Ina-uproot pa niya ang mga maling policy dati. I'll give you an example, President Aquino. President Aquino changed policy towards China about a year and a half into his administration or after the visit sa China, no? And we gave him all the leeway because in our country, it's the president who is in charge of foreign policy. May I also recognize that Secretary Andanar is also with us here today. So anyway, let me stop there because I know you have a lot of questions about this trip and many other trips. So let me just put on record, it was very, very, very successful. It created an almost unstoppable momentum. Why almost unstoppable? Of course, situations are fluid. There are a lot of things that can happen. But can you imagine, we've had very, very good relations with Japan the last 5 years. But Prime Minister Abe and President Duterte agreed together that we will bring the relationship to new heights. No? And of all the foreign visits, Prime Minister Abe socialized, no, with the whole delegation, going from table to table, graciously posing with us for pictures and graciously engaging some short questions. When world leaders go off program or off protocol in a face-to-face diplomacy, this is very, very good news because this means that the relationship is really warming.
Okay. Thank you very much, Senator Cayetano. The floor is now open for questions. Okay, question from Rose Centenario of Hataw.
Good afternoon, Senator. Ano po yung pagtanggap ng overseas Filipino workers na nakabase sa Japan sa drug war po ni Presidente Duterte?
Ang pagtanggap kay Presidente Duterte at pagtanggap sa drug war niya, necessarily nakatali. Because especially during December, bago nung campaign, pinupuntahan talaga siya ng mga seamen at ibang OFWs na ilan araw lang ang break sa Pasko para sabihin sa kanya, Sir, kami na bahala sa kikitain namin. Kami na bahala magpaaral sa mga anak namin. Ikaw na bahala sa safety nila. Diba? Until now, my wife can't get over, diba, that teenager na napakagandang pangarap alam mo, meron kaming taga-Tagig na student of architecture ni hindi kumuha ng scholarship namin dahil ayaw umabsent ng 1 day. Di ba nang hindi niya makuha yung 10 to 50,000, makapasok lang everyday, dun sa lamay niya, pinakita lahat ng drawings niya, napakagaganda, even the city, pinatay. I mean, dalawa, talagang sunod-sunod ang pagsaksak, no? Yun ang inaalala ng parents abroad. I mean, even kayo, sa mga may anak, your number one concern is their safety. Of course, their future, but you don't have a future if they're not safe. If they can't come home, what future are we talking about? So, that's why I said kanina, yes, it's unsettling. Meron talagang mga arguments sa human rights, ano yung paraan. But dun sa question that should we fight drugs? Yes. Should we declare war on drugs? Yes. Ang problema, culture Ang Europe kasi at US, mahigit siguro 600 years naka-experience ng war. Kaya pag sinabi mo sa kanilang war, iba yung naiisip nilang gere. If we used campaign against drugs, alam mo, hindi ganun kalakas ang angal ng Europe at US. So question, why don't we just use the word campaign against drugs? Dahil baliktad naman sa Pilipino. Pag sinabi mo sa Pilipino campaign, ang dating nangangampanya ka lang. Nakikiusap ka. Pag sinabi mong war, alam mong seryoso ka. So sino unahin natin? Ang mga Europeans at saka US na hindi nagsasuffer naman sa nangyayari sa atin? Or sarili natin? So that's what I'm saying, that it's unsettling because abroad, krinikriticize tayo, pinapalabas, may mass murder, etc. na hindi naman totoo. Pero duty naman nila intindihin ang kultura natin. Tayo ba nagko-comment tayo? Nagrarally ba tayo everyday? Nagfa-file ba tayo ng resolution sa UN kung bakit legal ang abortion sa Amerika? Sa atin, human rights violation yun. Walang kalaban-laban ang bata. Papatayin through abortion. Diba? So what would the US presidents feel? When they visit the Philippines, we will announce to the world, every time you come here, we will ask, why do you kill the unborn? Diba? We don't agree with them, but we're courteous enough to understand their sovereignty and their morality and their concept, no, of human rights. So is it too much for us to ask, come here, take a look for yourself, and we will show you that this drug war is a war against drugs and it's being done in accordance with international human rights standard. But if you tell us to change our language to suit you, that will not help our campaign here. So that is the reality, ladies and gentlemen. Again, it's unsettling to others, but that's the reality.
Next question from Raymond Tinaza of Bombo Radio. Microphone, please.
Hi, sir. Happy birthday. Sir, anyway, sir, I understand you've also been part of the close delegation of the president during his closest bilateral meetings with the Japanese counterparts. Was there any of those events, either formal or informal, any of those Japanese officials ever mentioned or raised concern over that separation or that actuation of the president towards or against the U.S., which is a stance ally of the Japan?
Okay. I cannot talk about matters that happened in confidence and when the cameras are out of the bilateral meetings, no? But in the first part of the bilateral meeting, after the greetings of the Japanese Prime Minister, all the cameras were still there. So narinig naman nung lahat yung statement ng presidente about the relationship with America and the relationship with Japan. Now, to answer your question directly, the way the diplomacy works is that the heads, president to prime minister, president to president, foreign secretary to foreign secretary, hindi nag-uusap diretso kaagad yan. They send a number of staffers, aides, ASECs, USECs to talk muna to bring up the point para walang init ng ulo. And even before we left, of course, there were some concerns by the Japanese counterparts because they are aligned with the U.S. policy, especially in the West Philippine Sea and South China Sea, and East China Sea also, there were concerns expressed. But there were informal gatherings like a dinner wherein the president and the high Japanese officials were able to talk about this. And why they might not agree totally, they came out with a very good understanding of why. Even the Japanese businessmen in the business forum were telling our officials, it's correct, you shouldn't be pushed around. So, and even in some of the meetings, no, the Japanese just simply emphasized that you understand our relationship with the U.S. and we are aligned with the U.S., but you are our brothers, we are friends. So that was the track. I'll give you another example of something like that that works out. U.S., South Korea, and Japan are allies. But Japan and South Korea do not see eye to eye on many, many issues. Yet they remain friends, and the U.S. is able to have good relationship with both. So under that circumstance or that paradigm, there's no reason that President Duterte cannot have very, very good relations with both Japan and China. In fact, some Japanese businessmen said, our benefit is we're slow but we're sure. But now, with what's happening in the Philippines, we have to be fast but still sure. Kasi may competition eh. No? It's not only American and Japanese money coming in. The rest of the Southeast Asia and Asia, no? Even Brunei is interested in investing, may pera din sila. Of course, China, nakita niyo yung laki ng ilang bilyon ang papasok. And competition is always good. Question, can Japan play a role in bringing the U.S. and Philippines closer together? Yes, they can. Why not? But it's really up to the new winner or the new president of the U.S. whether they will take the same tack taken by President Obama and Ambassador Goldberg in the first 100 days of the president, which the cabinet and the president deemed offensive and disrespectful of his campaigns, of his vision, of his struggles, or if the new U.S. president would take a step back and say, we are old allies, it's time to renew our friendship, let's talk. You know? The president has never said no to people who has asked him humbly or asked him with dignity or with honor, sir, can we talk?
So, was there also an instance wherein the Japanese officials may have brought up, I mean, directly or indirectly, their concern or questions, whatever, their thoughts on the alleged killings due to the anti-drug war?
Again, I cannot talk about specifics, but personally, I did not hear any. All I heard was full support because, one, the Japanese has closer cultural ties with us. Number two, they don't only have businesses here, they have expats here whose safety was also always the concern. Remember the kidnappings in the 90s. And third, I don't know if their foreign ministry has better interpreters than the State Department, because for them, when the president says certain words, natra-translate yung context eh. If it's an expression or a curse expression, rather than cursing a person derecho, it's translated to them eh. So when the president also says, like yesterday, di ba, ano sabi niya, sa Isabela, may nawala na mga gamit. At sabi niya, sa mga pulis, patayin ko kayo pag hindi sinoli niyan. So ano sabi ni presidente? Maniniwala naman kayo. Siyempre, yun ang language ko. Yun ang naiintindihan ng pulis eh. So sa Japanese, ganun din eh. Look at the Americans, no? If they say, terrorist, please stop, will the terrorist stop? They adopt language that come hell or high waters, they will use everything they have to go after terrorism. But that's not considered human rights violation. That's not considered, pushing people to commit murder against terrorists. But tayo, when they don't try to understand our culture, when we're dead serious at sabihin mong, patayan na pag ganyan. How many of us na naka-attend ng meeting, especially if you're from the South, at sinabi, kami, sa Taguig, sa Maharlika Village, Minsan nagkakausap ng ganon. Kung ganyan usapan, patayan na lang. No? But it's a hyperbole, it's a way of emphasizing that kung ganyan mangyayari, ba't hindi mo sinasabi magpatayan na tayo? Iba yon. Yung tunay na nagpapatayan, hindi na nagsasalita na patayan na tayo, nagbubunutan na lang. Nag-uupakan na. So it was much, much better with the Japanese counterparts than the US because they made much more effort to understand and much more effort to see the real translations. Aside from that, the president, in his speeches, nakita ko, inunahan na niya. Because the Japanese are very polite people. They're very courteous. So they will not come here like the Americans will announce na I'm meeting President Duterte, it'll be a pleasure, but I will ask him on 1, 2, 3. Hindi ganun ang Hapon eh. Di ba? Ang Hapon, we will go, we will talk, period. So ang nangyari, pagpunta ni Presidente doon, even if he wasn't being asked about military alliance, about the West Philippine Sea, sinama niya sa speech niya. Very diligent naman ang kalang foreign ministerinista nila. So it was much, much smoother. So the Americans can definitely learn a lot from the Japanese.
Last point. So you also been to China. So far, to whom or to where did you get the warmer or the more special treatment?
It's different kinds of warmness eh. Yung isa para bang yung matagal mong hindi nakita na snabang kayo, na bigla kayo nagkabate at nagyakapan. Yung isa, yung dati mo nang ka-close, pero iniisip mo, ngayon ba close pa rin tayo kasi inaway mo yung isang kaibigan niya. So both were very warm. And remember, integrated kasi, sa China kasi, napakalaki ng Filipino-Chinese community natin. Na may mga umiyak pa rin talaga eh. Kasi the last 5 years, they were also pained, di ba? Just as there are Filipino-Americans who are pained now with what's happening, there are a lot of Chinese Filipino who are pained with what happened. Now, sa Japanese naman, it wasn't pain because there's been no break in the relationship, there's been no downhill spiral. It was more concern. And when those concerns were addressed, and when they were all surprised, diba, that the Prime Minister Abe, who's a legend, no, also, and who's very stern and strict, did not think twice of doing the Duterte sign, and did not think twice of introducing his cabinet and mingling with the Philippine delegation. It really, it was also a diplomatic coup for Prime Minister Abe. The credit cannot go only to President Duterte. Prime Minister Abe met, the coup happened through the two of them, no? And I think this should cool things down, and it should show that in Asia, there is an Asian or Eastern way of doing diplomacy that is different from the West but can be more effective.
Okay. Next question from Pia of Rappler.
Sir, si President Duterte was observed chewing gum while he was signing documents with President Xi Jinping in China, and also there were reports that some Japanese officials were paranoid that he would chew gum in front of the emperor, and he has very informal ways. So as Senator on Foreign Relations and as a possible Secretary on Foreign Affairs, what do you think of this kind of behavior of the president, and will you be advising him to follow protocol next time?
Okay. First of all, no other president has been under the microscope as President Duterte. Did you notice when President Duterte was talking about Hitler, the whole world made a comment. But when President Aquino called China Hitler, when they were in the opposite side in the war, he was not under a microscope. Okay. I chew gum. But I don't chew gum when I'm in Singapore. Not because of diplomatic relations, but because bawal din at pag tinapon mo, patay ka eh. Talagang malaking fine or kulong, no? So, the Japanese and Chinese have so much similarities but also have so much difference. Sa China, hindi bawal yon at hindi yon discourteous. Sa Japan, it is. So, halimbawa po sa atin, when you put your hands in your pocket here, it could be a sign of humility It could be a sign of obedience, di ba? Nandyan ang presidente, nandyan ang teacher, so lahat kayo or kaya nakaganon, ganyan, di ba? Okay. So, that's why we have a professional DFA and a protocol assigned to Malacanang. They are briefed. That's why, it's not, we're in a democracy, so anyone can warn the president, anyone can put on Facebook, sana hindi ganyan. But trust in your fellow Filipino workers. The DFA and the protocol, Ambassador Painor is doing a great job. And all of this is briefed. The president could go to sleep early or can go out before the next meeting. But he spends 3 to 4 hours with all of us, listening to all kinds of briefings, starting with the DFA, from any other concern, from the legislature through Speaker Alvarez, myself as a Senate, DND, DTI, etc. No? So, all of this are professionally handled. Question, what is protocol nowadays? I don't know if you saw sa Facebook a few days ago, President George Bush was taking a picture with, tapos hindi niya makuha. So, kinalabit niya a month and a half ago, kinalabit niya si President Obama. Akala ni President Obama kasama siya sa picture, pero nakiusap si President Bush na si President Obama kumuha sa kanya. That wasn't protocol. But since they're both Americans and they're both, one's former president, one's president, okay lang. It's not all over the paper that Bush did not follow protocol and insulted the ganyan, no? So, to answer your question directly, of course, there are always concerns. That's why you have the protocol. But the opposite side of the coin is may konting kapraningan tayo as a nation that he will not follow protocol. But actually, he's very astute regarding that. No? And it's a different world. Yung halimbawa yung folding of the barong, all of this or the kind of pants he wears, all of this has been communicated to the host kung allergic siya sa isang klaseng fabric, kaya ganun yung gamit niya. Ang presidente natin pawisin. Pia, you yourself, di ba? Nalala mo nung campaign kayo ni sa CNN, di ba? Pinapahawakan pa yung t-shirt niya kung gaano kabasa Di ba? So, when he folds his barong, it's because he'd rather look a little bit less formal than look sobrang pawis na pawis, and you're representing your nation but you're human Di ba? So that's the reality there. So when it's required that he wears a suit, he will wear a suit. When it's required that he doesn't chew gum, he will not chew gum.